welcome to the February 18th PSDA Finance Committee. I'm Vince Cox, your committee chair representing Pinellas County. I'm appointed by your county commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Let's go around the room and introduce the other PSDA board members on the committee.
My name is Richard Bennett. I'm a commissioner in North Weddington Beach, and I represent the beach communities.
Dan Saraki, council member, City of Oldsmar.
So hard to follow, Dan. Jeff Gow, City Commissioner, representing City of Dunedin.
And I'm Brad Miller. I'm the CEO of PSDA.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, now's the time for public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak either online? Are we doing it online or not? We're not doing it online, so they're not there. And then are there anyone in the lobby? Is there anyone in the lobby?
There are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Now for action items, our first one is to approve the January 19th meeting minutes. Do we have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the January 19th minutes.
Second?
Second?
Okay, we have a second by Commissioner Saraki. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? That passes. Now, Brad, would you like to introduce Abhishek for the Energy Development Agreement with Duke Energy?
Yes, I would. Good morning, everybody. As you know, we've been working on getting ready for our fleet of electric buses to arrive and getting ready for this. We had hoped to advance to bring you sort of the complete package of our partnership with Duke Energy for solar panels for this facility, but it's a lot more complicated than at first that we thought. And so Abhishek is here to bring you what we think is the first agreement with Duke and explain that, and then more to come in the next couple months.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Finance Committee. Abhishek Dayal, Director of Project Management. Happy Friday, and I'm super energized about this item. And this item is for action, pending a few items that we are looking to complete. Next slide, please. So as the Finance Committee is aware, back in December, the committee as well as the board had approved a 5-year contract with Gillig LLC to purchase 60 all-electric buses. Now this essentially adds to our fleet of 6 already and 2 that are on its way to PSDA for a total of 68 all-electric buses. And so having these electric buses essentially poses us a requirement for additional electrical infrastructure to support those buses. And those include EV chargers, upgrades to our electrical infrastructure that we have today, such as switch gears. We're looking at building a utility room, etc. Next slide. So this graph here essentially shows how we're trending in terms of the expected fleet, electric fleet in the next 5 years. You can see we started off our journey in the all-electric fleet world with 2 buses, and then we've gradually added more electric buses to our campus. And in 2024, we are anticipating a total of 14 electric buses, so that will really significantly jump the electric fleet to 20, and then all the way to 68 buses by 2028. So that's a massive increase in electric buses to our campus. Next slide. So what that means is our energy usage will go up as well because our electric buses will need to be charged, they will need to be maintained at regular intervals. So what you see here in this graph is how our electric usage is going to go up from 2018, a few years ago, to 2028. So there are 2 colors shown. The blue color represents the PSDA electric usage. So the campus, the lights, all the administrative uses, all of those are denoted here in blue. And then the orange is the incremental electric usage that will substantially increase as we add more electric fleet to our campus. Next slide. So as we consider more electric vehicles coming in, as I noted, we will need more electrical infrastructure to accommodate our growing energy fleet, electric fleet. We are having discussions with Duke Energy. As part of our first kind of phase, we are looking for Duke to perform some suitability analysis to see how they or we could accommodate those growing power needs. That's the graphic that I showed earlier. So we're also looking at other possible renewable energy installations, such as solar panels that we've talked about in the past, also in phases to offset those increased electrical usage. Next slide. So one of the elements of the partnership with Duke that we're talking about is coordinating with Duke to assess the suitability of installing these renewable energy for the increased all-electric fleet. And then also looking long-term on deploying these type of renewable energy, such as solar panels, at PSTA campus. One of the short-term features that we're looking at for solar panels is up on the rooftops, then expanding it out in the yard, and then potentially even out in the employee parking lot. So those are kind of phased approach that we're still discussing with Duke Energy. So this first agreement that we are presenting to you today, that's the site access agreement. And what that allows Duke to do is perform those inspections and assessments that are necessary for them to understand the suitability of installing this infrastructure, both for renewable energy as well as for the electric fleet charging infrastructure. And then as Brad noted, we've been talking to them, and through an incremental approach, we will be bringing back those agreements back to the committee and to the board, assuming the committee agrees to those agreements. Next slide. So this first agreement, so the recommendation is approval of this site access agreement with Duke Energy for the purpose of conducting these assessments required to determine the suitability of installing renewable energy infrastructure. I'll also preface this by saying that we have a few items to be worked out with Duke as it relates to insurance and liability, which we don't think are substantial. We're just down to those last few items. So this recommendation is subject to approval by our CEO as well as our legal counsel going to the board. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Somebody, okay. Commissioner Gao?
Thank you, Chair. Within this agreement with Duke, it's zero cost, or the cost would be built into any future partnerships we have with them. But if it is not sustainable, we would owe them $100,000. What would make it not suitable? What are some of those factors that would lead us to end up paying $100,000?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you brought that up, Commissioner Gao. There are stipulations as far as it's a no-cost agreement subject to us moving forward with Duke on future agreements. And so a couple of things that we will be looking at is, or Duke will be looking at, is what are the infrastructure needs for them to be able to place solar panels, the electrical infrastructure that they would have to build to support those electrical fleet. They will provide us with a cost structure for those future agreements. That's something that we will have to review. We will take it to the committee and to the board, and if we find that those are not sustainable for us, then those would be the circumstances where we don't move forward.
Okay, so the sustainability portion is those future agreements and whether or not it's fiscally responsible for us.
It's fiscally responsible or prudent or requires some additional analysis that this agreement does not cover.
Right. And I did love within the slides, not only the number of buses, it shows the graph there, but also the amount of energy that we're gonna need to draw, the future draw on energy, which is just as critical. So I'm glad that PSD is focused on that. Part of what they're gonna look at is the solar panels. And what is involved with that? We wouldn't partner with Duke to buy solar panels from them and have them put them in. Is Duke in that business?
Yes, so Duke has worked with other entities on placing solar panels over their infrastructure. And what we've preliminarily discussed with Duke, and again, this is subject to the agreements that we will bring forward, is potentially them owning the solar panels and essentially leasing the space, from PSDA. And so that's something that has to be worked out as far as the feasibility and what are those terms and conditions under which that would occur. But to your question, Duke has had arrangements with other entities in placing solar panels previously.
Right, and it's a similar situation, maybe you've seen it at the pier in St. Petersburg. There's solar panels all over the parking lots of the pier, and I think on the walkway too. And then that's all owned by Duke, and they're leasing, there's a lease arrangement with the city.
Okay.
That's one of the scenarios
Okay.
that we're trying to work out.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gao and Commissioner Shulman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for my tardiness. So I missed the first part of the presentation, so this may have been covered. So it says that there's a maximum termination fee of $100,000. Is that a straight line fee, or is that, is the fee $100,000, or is it some version of $100,000 depending on other factors?
If you're saying it's prorated or?
Right, because it says a maximum, it's either a maximum, meaning it can be anything from 0 to 100,000, or it is 100,000.
It is 100,000.
Okay, so it's a $100,000 fee if we decide not to go through with Duke's plan, or they find it's unsuitable. So the question I have then is, what would the cost be if we were to hire our own consulting company to design a plan for us, as opposed to going with Duke and then having whatever they think, which may or may not perfectly suit our needs, but I imagine would definitely suit Duke's needs. Do we have an idea of what that cost would be? And would it be better to be untethered to a particular vendor versus being stuck with one and letting them decide how things go?
So that's a good question. So one thing I just wanted to clarify, that this work that Duke would perform, that's not design. It would not be engineering work.
Okay.
So it's basically just suitability assessment. They will inspect our roof structure, our existing infrastructure, and just understand what's out there, and then assess, what's the feasibility of, solar panels or electrical charging infrastructure. The design would come later, assuming we do sign an agreement with Duke.
Okay, so even better. So what I'd be interested to find out is what's the cost for having a suitability study done on our facilities here? Versus just moving forward with Duke.
It is a good question, and it's something that we've asked. We did some preliminary work previously with a private engineering firm that we have under contract, and so far, their estimates of what they gave us a year ago are fairly comparable to what Duke is proposing us as far as prices. For the whole infrastructure and the solar panels. So far, we've done some due diligence to see where this is going down the road, to make sure that we not only can get reimbursed for the $100,000, but, to have a financially sustainable system. I think we do need to do once we get the final cost estimate from Duke for the whole package, which is what they're gonna do with some of this work, where we are gonna have to compare it to going in a different direction. The reason that I think it is maybe appropriate to to have this $100,000 thing, because as one, I think Abhishek said, or somebody said, it's like when you call the plumber, they say, well, you know, you have to pay $200 just to come to your house. And then maybe that $200 gets paid back if you have a whole bunch of plumbing work that they can pay. But because we are using the solar, the energy for this big ramp up in electric power needs, there's sort of two capital projects. There is the electric infrastructure that is sort of not very sexy, that like Henry gets excited about. And it includes all the chargers and all of the electrical infrastructure that we need, no matter if we go solar or we stay with coal, you know. By and large, that is probably very likely going to be provided by Duke Energy. That kind of electrical infrastructure work, all of it so far has been provided by Duke. So that's what makes me think they're going to have to do this work anyway for that. And then perhaps the thing that is most competitive, that we might be able to get a different situation, is the solar down the road. But at least for the infrastructure piece, I don't think this is a very high risk that we're not going to go forward. I mean, the buses are on order. We have to do this.
So if we move forward on the infrastructure piece, then the termination fee wouldn't apply.
That's correct.
So it's not contingent on necessarily doing the solar project with them.
No, it's only contingent on moving forward with Duke, whatever that next phase would be. So if it's solar panels or electrical infrastructure, that fee would be waived.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. I feel like it's a little bit of both. That there's not a clear answer, because you also said part of it was for, you know, coming up with the whole plan and the design, and then Abhishek, you said it was suitability study. So it still sounds like both. I just want to make sure that we're not getting into a position where we're somewhat beholden to a particular vendor.
Well, we want them to plan for both projects. We want them to plan not only for the big ramp up in electrical needs, but that is needed for all the plug-ins of all the buses, but we do want them at the same time to work out all of the plans for solar panels on the roof and on the parking lots to power all that stuff.
Understood. I just also know that at the end of the day, this is a really good deal for Duke also. You know, having that much solar generation mid-county next to their main transmission lines, and we have the waste-to-energy plant here. So, I mean, it's a great, I mean, you're talking about placing a solar farm. This would be a perfect place for a solar farm. And that's basically what they're creating. We're just gonna be one of their main customers for the solar farm, because we're gonna have a draw, but we're gonna be their customer. So it's beneficial for them also. And so I just wanna make sure that those benefits are mutually beneficial, and not one-sided. So, we'll just have to see how it continues to pan out.
The other thing maybe just to note, I think, and we were just in Tallahassee, and you and I were talking about the net metering bill that's up there and everything. That's not so much of an issue with PSC, because as Abhishek's graph showed, we're not going to be really sending out much electricity once we get all those buses. We're going to be using it all, and still needing power to come in. At least that's the estimate, isn't that right?
Yes, and in fact, what I didn't show beyond the graphs, I mean, the graph only goes till 2028. We'll continue to expand on our electric fleet, so our energy usage will go even further up. So this is a long-term investment that we're talking about to offset our energy.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, so while your statement is accurate, I don't know if it paints the right picture. Because even though our energy use is going to be going up, our energy use at night is going to be going up when those buses come back to the depot for full charges. Sure. So we are going to be sending power to Duke during the day when the sun is shining, for the most part, and then we are going to be requesting that back. So the net metering and how that weighs out is a huge impact. If we're sending it at wholesale cost and we're buying it back at retail, that is right now we send it at retail, we get it back at retail. So those changes would have a dramatic effect on the financial outlook of solar for us. I mean, if we were charging all the buses during the day and running at night, completely different story. So, which is why when we talked, I also said that I wanted to make sure that storage and keeping our power here so that we're not sending it back and we can use our own power, in which case we get that benefit, needs to be part of the calculus. So I just want to make sure we're clear. It's a complicated issue. There's not one right way to do it, and there's going to be competing forces with different entities as well. So I just want to make sure that we're all educating ourselves properly on how this might proceed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Schulman.
Mr. Chair, I just have a comment. Excuse me. I'm actually really excited about this project. We've ordered those buses, they're on their way. This is something that has to be done for our infrastructure so that we can charge these buses and get this program going. I'm excited about it, and Abhishek, thank you for your hard work in presenting this to us, and I look forward to seeing the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Saraki. I'd like to make one comment, and this addresses what Commissioner Schulman had said and what also Mr. Miller had said about the scope of work of consultants coming in and look at our roof structure, looking at what we have to offer, what we need to beef up, so on and so forth. I'm going through this right now. I work part-time for a church, and we have a huge roof at this church that needs replacement. So what we did is we went along the lines, we hired a consultant to make sure that the company we were hiring for the roofing aspect of it was doing the scope of work that is really necessary and would serve our needs in the future. And consultants ain't cheap, is all I can tell you. It costs us $5,000 for the consultant, and that's you're paying the chief consultant $500 an hour, and then $350 for his assistant. So and this place is probably 20 times larger than the church, that I represent. And so that's 100, 20 times 5? Is that 100,000? Yeah. Okay. So, I'm thinking it's just not, based on my experience, that it's not an inexpensive proposition to have a reputable consulting firm come out. But then again, I understand Commissioner Schulman's concerns, and naturally Duke, has something to gain here as well. And, but I think that's probably, in my opinion, the way to go with the Duke proposal, at this time. And then we roll the dice, and I hopefully come out 7 or 11 and come out all right. So that being said, do we have a motion to?
I'll move that, or recommend approval of the access agreement with Duke Energy.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Bennett, a second by Commissioner Gao. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, and Commissioner Schulman is opposed. So the motion passes 3-1.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek. All right, let's go to the monthly financial statement. Julie Lupus is with us today, and will you walk us through it, please? December 2021.
Good morning. I'm Julie Lupus, Director of Accounting. For the month of December, we finished $7.7 million unfavorable to budget due to the timing of the property tax revenue. We received in November what we had budgeted for in December. On the expense side, we came in at $989,000 favorable to budget. Of this, $240,000 is attributed to purchase transportation being under budget. Still feeling the effects of COVID factor into this favorable variance, as is the effect of budgeting for the new vendors that we're using now. Excuse me. $332,000 of the favorable expense variance is associated with being under budget in salaries, and the remaining $367,000 variance is dealing with savings in services expenses throughout all divisions in the authority. All right. Turning to the year-to-date financials for December, we finished with a surplus of $48.2 million and was $2.2 million favorable to budget. If in the year-to-date, the property tax timing differences we see in the monthly financials smooth out. Expense control is helping carry this surplus. Salaries are under budget, $628,000, and purchase transportation services follow the monthly trends that come in at $674,000 for the budget, with the budget year-to-date. So that's just a high-level look at December, and I know that's a lot of numbers really quickly, but does anyone have any questions?
Do we have any questions from the dais? Or comments?
Okay, I'll see you next month for January
See you
then.
next month. Thank you, Julie.
All right.
All right, take care. Okay, now we have the quarterly reports. Debbie, would you like to introduce this item for us?
Good morning, everyone, and before I introduce the quarterly reports and go through them, I have an announcement to make. Since our last meeting, we have been awarded the GFOA Award of Excellence for our annual report, and so many thanks to Julie for her hard work and all the staff members who contributed to that. So on your quarterly reports, we have our capital projects report that is in here. And I'm just going to give you a few highlights that are in here, because we don't often get this opportunity to go through all the reports on a quarterly basis. So from a passenger amenities side, we talk about the Sunrunner project. And I know the board is always very interested in the Sunrunner project. We talk about it all the time. For your reading pleasure is all the detail you ever want to know in the package. But this report, as of the end of December, shows construction of all the platforms were complete. Restriping on First Avenue North and South was complete. Transit signal prioritization is underway. And we are about 95% post-design, with construction at 65% complete. And from the CFO's perspective, absolutely no budget issues. Abhishek has done a great job staying within the project budget. So that's very exciting. From our training and third-party contracts, we are looking at transit-oriented development study, which you heard a fine report on from Cassandra and her team last month. From the facility side, we are under budget based on the Clearwater Transit Center. And design right now is on hold with ongoing discussions with the City of Clearwater, as you're well aware. On the technology side, you also heard a little bit about our HASTIS software program and the success we're having in doing web-based bidding for our bid runs for the bus operators, self-service work scheduling monitoring, and many other features that go with that. From a technology, so that's our technology standpoint, and we are pretty much under budget on most areas. There's some timing differences as it relates to the receipt of vehicles when we paid for them in this fiscal year, for those trolleys that you see. We also have reports, and I'm playing the part of Michael Hansen today, but we also have fuel reports in here. That's our next report in the package. And the fuel, as you know, is skyrocketing. And thanks to Henry and his team, and also our electric vehicles, we are actually under budget on fuel year to date. So we're seeing our miles per gallon go up on the vehicles that we do have. So thank you, Henry, for that, because it's helping to offset where the market is. And I'm looking forward to the electric vehicles. Playing the role of Michael Hansen, we have both the quarterly investment report in here, as well as our PSTA reserves restricted and unrestricted report. Nothing too much exciting. We're seeing the impact of getting all the property tax Julie was just talking about into the bank that we then use throughout the year to sustain ourselves, and we're doing quite well. So I don't know if there's any questions on that before I turn it over to, is Liz here?
She's down there.
She's up.
Love you.
Debbie?
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Liz for the quarterly health insurance report, unless you've got a question.
Yeah, I do. Does anyone from the dais have any comments or questions for Debbie? Okay, one thing that you did mention, that the platforms are complete on the, for the Sunrunner, but when we say complete, what do we mean by complete? Because I noticed on First Ave North, there's a platform, but there's no kind of anything else there. But go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, again. Abhishek Dayal. The platforms, the concrete platforms, the 14-inch platforms, those are all complete. There's still work going on around the platforms, like the curb ramps and the curb returns, some of the ADA ramps and sidewalk improvements. Those are what the contractor is working on. And in some stations, and there are very few that are left, particularly on First Avenue North and South, is where they're pouring the red concrete. That has been mostly done. There are about 3 stations, 3 platforms left where they are pouring the red concrete.
Okay, and I've noticed also, up and down the streets now, we have the Sunrunner, I guess, practice runs or training runs and so on and so forth, which is encouraging. You know, my wife and I ride around a lot, and we're encouraged by seeing this. When do we expect to paint the roads red?
So that's something that we're working with our contractor on, the timing of the materials for the red asphalt. The items come from China.
Okay.
And so we're navigating the same supply issues that everyone around the country is facing. So we're just keeping an eye out for those issues. We do plan on starting the pavement with the red asphalt in the next couple of months.
Okay, and I did notice also, apparently work's done in the evening or at night on, this was on First South, where they're actually doing the re-asphalting of the roads, repaving the roads as well, too. That was right near 20th Street.
The city is doing that.
Yeah, the city of
Okay, that's the
St.
city.
Petersburg is doing the repaving, so we're coordinating with them so that we perform the work during the day and they perform it
That's
during the
good.
night, so.
And do you know if that will be done throughout First from North and First South, if they'll be repaved both roads? Are you familiar or not?
Yeah, so they're actually doing the repaving between 16th and 34th Street on
Okay.
both First Avenue North and First Avenue.
That's good, because those roads need to be repaved. That's a fact. All right, thank you so much. That's all I have. Thank you, Devin. Okay, next, we'll have Mr. Miller to highlight from the right.
Is Liz gonna go
Oh,
back?
Liz, next, we're gonna have Liz. My apologies, Liz.
No problem.
And-
Good morning, committee members.
Thank
You should have the first quarter insurance update in your packet. You can see in terms of enrollment, not much has changed in the plans. The high deductible is still the second most utilized plan, and the base plan is still the most utilized in terms of our employees, with the buy-up plan coming in last in enrollment. The total claims cost for the base plan is at 50%. In comparison, the buy-up plan is at 26% and our high deductible plan is at 24%. Currently, our loss ratio for the FY '22 year is at 91%. To compare that to FY '21's quarter one loss ratio, the quarter one in FY '21 was at 75%. But in talks with the insurance brokers, this seems to be the norm in the current health market. And with that being said, I wanted to just give everyone a heads up that we will be going out for bid for health insurance this year. We're going to be comparing both self-funded and fully funded avenues, just to make sure we're looking at everything that would give the employee the best options around. So, any questions?
Any questions for the day? All righty, thank you for that report, Liz. And we have no questions. Next, we'll proceed with Mr. Miller on ridership report.
Thank you. So that is in your packet. I would just, one thing I would point out on it is our mobility programs are up 64% from a year ago, and a year ago they were free. So that is testament to the whole new paratransit and mobility program system we have in place. That I was up in Tallahassee, they were all very positive to hear about all the stuff we're doing there. I thought there would be maybe some extra time in our agenda, and so I'd like to, Chair and the committee, if you're okay, two things. Because we may or may not have a quorum for the planning committee, I thought, and since Commissioner Gao is here for the finance committee, sometime soon, Jacob Labuka might be arriving, and he could present the AVA agreement for Dunedin. You wouldn't be able to take an action on it, but at least you could see it before it goes to the board meeting next week. And then in addition, I asked James Bradford, our chief operating officer, to be here to talk to you. I know all of you have received one or more emails from April Murphy, our union leader, asking, demanding that PSTA reopen and renegotiate the contract that we just agreed with them on last fall. And so we're kind of in it, like thieves, and James is in it a lot. And so I thought he could come and kind of remind us on what was in the original agreement, what's going on with the union right now. It's very likely that there'll be representatives of the union coming to our board meeting next week to make public comment, to ask you to renegotiate the contract. And so James, do you want to talk about that a little bit, and then when Jacob arrives, we can talk about the AVA agreement. Can you press this button?
Is my mic on? Okay, good morning. And actually, I brought a couple of slides with me just to refer to. Julie, if you have those, feel free to put them up. So last summer, we went through about 9, 10 bargaining sessions, as we do every 3 years. And it usually comes down to working conditions and wages. And we were able to knock out all the working conditions, and both sides agreed upon. And then we get down to wage increases. I absolutely believe, and I believe the union believed it as well when they ratified it last October 3rd, that this is probably one of the richest contracts that we had for our frontline employees, at least since I've been here, maybe ever. And it came with a lot of money guarantees that we don't talk about a whole lot, that guarantees them certain overtime, certain spread time, things of that nature. But it really put us right toward the top of Florida transit agencies. And you'll see here, they had overwhelming support where they voted 216 to 78. And then we had board approval on my birthday there, August 18th. If you go to the next slide, one of the things we did during this contract, just to remind you, we settled it for 3.25%, an increase at the top bus operator step over the next 3 years. And nationally, out of 178 transit agencies, the national settled average increase is about 3.1, 3.18 over just under 200 agencies. So, we look to measure ourselves against some of our other transit agencies, including in Florida, to make sure that we're keeping up. But as our union reminds us, hey, let's also be the example. And with this contract, it was the first time in PSA history where we brought all of the classifications to $15 or above for the first time in history. And then the one thing that we did that's, and the union doesn't talk about this when they're bringing this up, is we increased all the lower steps. Mm-hmm. Usually when you come to the table, the union is interested in the majority, the veteran, the very top max people. But we still also plan for the future. So we want to take care of the present, but we also want to prepare for the future. So if you look there, and just for bus operators, we're budgeted for 400 bus operators, and about 250 to 260 are in that top step, so they received 3.25 over the next 3 years. But we did something that we normally don't do, and usually this is management urging this, the union doesn't, which is we increase the bottom steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, when you're hired, you have a training rate of $15, and then you go to $16 out of training. Well, we increased those, and we increased them from 15 to 16. We added about $1 each, which is worth a little over a 6% increase for most of those lower steps. So when the contract went into effect last October 1st, not only did some of our lower junior people get an immediate 6% increase, when they hit their service anniversary date, in between those steps, they also get the additional increase. So for example, if they're going from step 2 to step 3, they got their 6% increase, but then they'll also get that significant percentage increase from $16.50 to $17.25, for example. So we're really paying attention to that. In a world right now, you know, you see the New York Times and Boston Globe and Tampa Bay Times and USA Today declaring this the year of the Great Resignation, where a lot of businesses and agencies are short on people power. We really tried to focus on our ability to recruit, attract new talent, and retain, and that's really what we tried to do with this contract. If you go to the next slide, I believe it just kind of shows how we stack up against some of the other Florida agencies. Again, there's about 33 Florida agencies altogether. I went through and updated the numbers as of February 2022. So since then, all of those agencies that you see up there have had contract negotiations, so they've gone up a little bit, and we're still kind of at the number 5 spot amongst some of the higher paying agencies, and you see Fort Lauderdale, Miami, West Palm Beach, and Hart right ahead of us. Hart's at the table now. I believe ATU voted down their contract last week, so you know Hart's in the middle of negotiations for their next 3 years, but our next negotiation will come up probably in the summer of 2024. This contract that we have goes through September 30th, 2024. So I believe, you know, I saw signs of our union saying, you know, their negotiations were done in bad faith. Absolutely was not. It was done in great faith. We took our time with it, and I believe, you know, they're always want to see, you know, how admin is stacking up against them. And so I think there was some misinformation among them at how the administrative employees did their market study adjustments to make sure that, you know, folks on the admin side were kind of paid competitive to their peers. And then that was just kind of, you know, fuel for, hey, you know, you held out on us. We believe you owe us some more money. That's where we're at right now. I think we had a good last contract. The last slide really is, you know, if you dig into the contract, some of the guarantees that they have in terms of how they get paid. If we call them back, for example, for a shift, there's a 3-hour pay guarantee. If they're working 12 hours for spread time, you know, they'll get an additional half time for every additional hour that they work over a certain amount. Uniform tool allowance, all of those we increased. CT time, which is if we have operators that pick up an extra shift that starts less than 2 hours after their current shift ended, we pay them through. So that's the continuous time. So there's a lot of things in there that's worth money, including the longevity pay that not a lot of agencies offer, that we offer. 20 years, $425 check every year, 25 years or more, $550 check every year, 30 years or better, $675. And all those things, every contract, I think we look to try to improve upon. But, and again, that's just, I'm just, Chief Miller just wanted to just kind of give a brief recap, but I'll stop it there and take any questions anyone may have.
Mr. Chair, as James is describing sort of the takeaway that I asked him to do from that, because we have no idea what they're going to say next week at the meeting, but what they've said in the emails and what they've said to us constantly is they are very focused on how this contract compares to the administrative employees of PSTA and what the administrative employees got. And my response was, well, we kind of did the same thing. We looked at what other comparable jobs out in the market, just like James showed that we looked for the bus operators, and then adjusted folks, not everybody, but we adjusted people that were below average. And at PSTA, the bus operator wages have been above average. Well, they don't care. They don't care if about Miami-Dade or anything like that. So then the other piece really comes down to sort of the definition of being an administrative employee at will, where your pay is not guaranteed. You get a performance evaluation versus, as James was describing, the benefit of being in a union is it's automatic. You get the pay increase. And then that last slide that James showed, you get a whole bunch of other pay that is too complicated for me to even understand, but there's constantly ways that you can get paid. And if you want to be an administrative accountant or a marketing person or a phone person or whatever, your pay is not, it's just different. It's just different. They are constantly comparing them like they're apples to apples, but they're just really not.
Right, that's true.
And the other reason, again, that I'm just hopeful that we can kind of stay the course on this is just because, as James said, he works very hard to have a very positive, collaborative labor negotiations, and then to just reopen it. Really, it started on October 1, so just three or 4 months ago, to just start over again is, I know it'll be a precedent-setting thing. I'm just not so sure that's the best interest for our long term. I think, James, we've denied their grievance to reopen it, and now they're going to go to arbitration. Is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct. We held a class action grievance this week. The union filed a class action, which the term class action means it impacts multiple bargaining members. We held that via Zoom webinar. They actually had 50 plus of their own members show up to the grievance, which is unheard of. And they pointed to Article 33, which they said gives them the power to demand that we come back to the table on wage negotiations. So there's a zipper clause in our agreement. It's combined with Article 32. The article they're citing refers to the successor agreement, the next agreement, to be able to, open that up in a timely fashion. But Article 32 refers to every side during the negotiations had a right to object and to speak openly, and are in agreement as this thing is signed and ratified to move forward. So I denied the grievance. The SEIU bargaining unit then turned around and declared an intent to arbitrate. And so that's where we are right now. And once they declare a final act to arbitrate, usually both sides will reach out to FMCS, the Federal Mediators group, and we decide on an arbitrator, and then we'll set a date for arbitration and rule on it from there. So that whole process probably takes several months or so.
Brad, in their communication, do you know what they're requesting? What they want? They want more pay? What do they want?
They want more pay. I don't know if they have a specific ask, unless you...
There's no specific ask that I know of, just to, hey, come back to the table and let's increase our wages.
Thank you.
Do we have any other comments or questions from the dais? Commissioner Schulman?
Thank you for the report. I've generally been in favor of trying to find a way to mitigate some of the personal financial pressures all of our employees are facing that was unexpected when negotiating contracts in July, August of last year. So I've been an advocate of that. That being said, I think going about it this way is not, the way that the union's going about it is not ideal. And comparing to what administrative folks got paid in those adjustments, that was also all part of a public board-approved process over the summer. We talked about, we voted on that this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at all of these different wages for these different employee categories, and we're going to bring them to a market rate. We went below a market rate across the board. So to say that we're acting in bad faith, I think is improper, since all of those were public meetings, right? And so people negotiating on the union side would have been aware that we were doing just that. And they could have had the opportunity to say, we want to wait till that process is done before we make any comments. And they chose not to, and then voted for the current contract overwhelmingly. So, you know, I feel like those comments are misplaced, and that PSTA has done a laudable job of trying to be inclusive and upfront with what the employees, you know, are looking at in their contracts. And I agree. I think the current contract is very, very favorable to the employees based on what we knew. I'm still in favor of trying to find a way to help in the current environment, but I also don't know if, you know, I read the email that came in from the head of the SEIU. I don't know exactly what her position is, or the rep here, and it didn't strike me as let's reconcile and find a path forward. It felt more bombastic and a little bit more aggressive than I think it's not the best approach on either side. So I think the PSTA is doing a great job. I appreciate the effort of staff and administration, and this has been an open process from the start.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to make a comment if we have no more from the dais. Mr. Bradford, your presentation to me was very clear, and especially when you said, I note this, as I'm a former union member, and a union tends to look out for the senior employees and make sure that they're taken care of in the immediate, all right? And naturally, when the negotiations are taking place, they're gonna look for those futures too. But what I really, really like about this contract, and you delineated it well in the PowerPoint, was that at the bottom, that there's some hefty increases right there. And I think that's important because as I understand it, when a new employee comes on, it's a little tougher because they work a split shift, they have to do some things. You know, I don't know if it's demanded, but that being said, that there's that increase in pay to encourage these folks to stay here, because I'm sure there's quite a bit of effort and time and money put in training an employee, and you don't want to lose them after 3 to 6 months. And if they can just hang on that, 6, 8, 10 months, 12 months to get, a permanent schedule, it's so important to keep that. That's for our future too, the future of this agency. And I appreciate that effort. And I appreciate also seeing that PowerPoint and seeing that we're in line really with Hart, our wages are. And I'll get to the CEO part of that also. But the other 3 counties are in South Florida, and naturally the cost of living is higher down there. So I truly agree with Commissioner Schulman that this is equitable, this is fair, and this is well thought out. And I know part of what I had read or seen, and this was kind of a hit on Mr. Miller's increase, and I think it's notable to see that the CEO over at Hart, which is really a pretty comparable public transportation service like we are, is that that CEO just got a raise from $250,000 to $287,000 in the last several weeks. And so Mr. Miller, we've put him at $229 right now, which is substantially less, and we all recognize his talent, so we don't want to lose him. So that being said, I appreciate you, Mr. Bradford, and you, Mr. Miller, and thank you.
Thank you. So I think actually Commissioner Albritton just texted me saying he's coming.
Good.
So we can talk to James a little bit more if you want, or we can...
We can go to McDonald's.
I actually, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I seem to recall back with regards to our health insurance, that when we've had premium increases, our policy in the past had been to split that 50-50. That was in the contract, in the prior contracts. But we opted to, instead of passing on all those costs to employees, we absorbed those costs. Is that correct? Am I remembering that correctly? Oh, here comes Debbie. The official answer is walking this way.
You've got a great memory, and as I recall, it was in 2018 when our health insurance costs really skyrocketed. and we normally would split the increase 50-50 with the union. Again, looking at the lower steps, what we did is limited what their increase would be to a 25% of their, of it, rather than like splitting it up. And we limited what was that, and so PSTA absorbed the majority of the cost on that.
And,
Majority of the cost increase.
the
Yeah, the cost increase, yes.
Right. And I appreciate that. I don't know if that's, those sorts of things are also fully communicated along the way. You know, I know our health insurance here is very well funded by PSTA at all different levels compared to, you know, the marketplace. I think sometimes those things are lost in as part of the overall compensation picture. And there's just this focus on the hourly earnings. And that's just one piece. That's one piece I happen to remember that we've done. And I know that there's been a lot more along the way to help support the employees. And so I am all in favor of making sure our employees are treated well, and I think that they are. And so I just want to make sure if I was remembering that correctly.
Thank you, and I'll be prepared to look back on what happened in 2018, but I know that was the year that happened in, to be very prepared if someone should have that question at the board meeting.
I knew it was a few years ago. We weren't in this room. We were upstairs.
And James, didn't we put in actually caps into the agreement?
It was an
Yes,
MOU.
it said,
Caps
on the back of our current contract, there's an MOU for medical insurance premiums, and just as Ms. Leas says, we put caps in there for some of the lower paid entry-level bargaining members, so that their responsibility is limited at 25% of any increases.
So as we were sitting here, I was recalling other things that we've done that have helped make lives of our employees easier and taking on those responsibilities. And so I want to make sure that those aren't lost when we're looking at the total picture. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good point, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Okey-doke. Do we have any other business for this committee today?
Do we have a quorum for
We do.
planning now?
We,
We do.
oh, he said he's coming.
Yeah. Commissioner Albritton will be here.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead, and if there's no further business, we'll adjourn this meeting.
Great job, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
Great job.
thank you, my friends.
The problem with having meetings on Fridays is because there's T. Barda and Renee Flowers and Deborah Big Sanders are now